Imagine a winter night long before electricity. Snow hushes the streets. Inside a timbered German home, a fir tree stands in the corner, its branches hung with apples, wafers, nuts wrapped in foil, and, unbelievably, small candles that will soon be lit. The flames flicker, children stare wide-eyed. For them it's magic. For us it's the origin of a question we still ask every December. Why do we decorate Christmas trees? Let's start with the deeper roots. Evergreens in winter go back long before Christmas. In the ancient Mediterranean and across northern Europe, people prized any plant that stayed green while everything else died back. Romans celebrated Saturnalia in December and decorated with greenery. In the Germanic north, winter solstice customs, what we now call Yule, involve bringing boughs indoors as a sign of life returning. None of this was a Christmas tree yet, but the symbolism was already set. Everlasting life, hope in the darkest season, a promise that the sun would turn back. Now fast forward to medieval Europe and meet a curious tradition that bridges pagan greenery and Christian symbolism, the paradise tree. In late medieval German-speaking lands, December 24th wasn't just Christmas Eve, it was the feast of Adam and Eve. Towns staged religious plays, mystery plays, telling Bible stories. For the Eden scene, they needed a tree in winter that could stand in for the tree of knowledge. Enter the fir. These paradise trees were often decorated with apples to represent the fruit and with white wafers symbolizing the Eucharist. Over time, when the church restricted public drama for getting rowdy, parts of the pageant moved into guild halls and eventually private homes. The tree, decorated with apples and wafers, came along for the ride. By the 1500s and early 1600s, we get our first written records of evergreen trees brought indoors at Christmas in the German lands. One famous note from Strasbourg in 1605 describes citizens setting up fir trees in their parlours and decorating them with paper roses, apples, wafers, and tinsel. Another thread runs through merchant and guild communities, where trees showed up at festive gatherings, sometimes gifted to apprentices or used as centerpieces at seasonal feasts. Were these the first Christmas trees, it's always risky to crown a single first, but this is where the practice becomes visible. If you've heard the story that Martin Luther invented the Christmas tree after seeing stars through the branches on a winter walk, that's more legend than fact. But the image captures something true about how the tree was understood. The evergreen became a miniature cosmos, a vertical axis connecting earth and heaven, dressed in symbols of creation, fall, and redemption. As the custom spread across the German states in the 17th and 18th centuries, it met resistance outside those regions. In some Protestant communities, gifts were moved from St. Nicholas's Day to Christmas Eve and given around the tree, which helped the tree stick. But in Catholic regions, the crèche, the nativity scene, remained central. Through the 1700s, the practice matured quietly in German households, often linked to family rituals and child-centered gift-giving. The 19th century is where everything accelerates. Think of it as the age when the private German Christmas tree becomes a public European and American tradition. Two forces drive this: migration and media. First, migration. German immigrants carried the tree to new places. In the American colonies and then the United States, communities in Pennsylvania had decorated trees by the late 18th century. Moravian settlements, known for their music and rich seasonal customs, helped normalize the idea. The tree's spread was slow but steady, and newspapers occasionally mocked it as an exotic German toy, which shows you it was visible enough to be teased. Then media, specifically one image, does the rest. In 1848, a woodcut illustration of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert standing with their children around a decorated tree at Windsor Castle was published in the Illustrated London News. A few years later, an American magazine reran the image with subtle edits to make it feel more domestic, and the British royal custom instantly became a fashionable middle-class ideal on both sides of the Atlantic. If you've ever wondered why we sometimes call it a Victorian Christmas, this is why. Domestic warmth, childhood wonder, and a curated set of traditions, cards, carols, and, yes, trees were packaged as a wholesome modern holiday. The 1800s also transformed how we decorate. German artisans in the glass-blowing town of Lauscha began making delicate glass ornaments, apples, nuts, birds, that mimicked the symbolic foods once used on trees. American retailer F.W. Woolworth started importing these ornaments in the 1880s, and they sold in astonishing numbers. tinsel, originally fine strands of real silver in 17th century Nuremberg, evolved into cheaper metals and eventually lead strands before safety concerns pushed manufacturers to switch materials in the 20th century. The point is that decoration shifted from edible and symbolic to durable and collectible. Lighting, too, changed everything. Remember those early candles, the literal fire hazard flickering on dry branches? In 1882, Edward H. Johnson, a colleague of Thomas Edison, wired up the first electrically lit Christmas tree in his New York home. For years, electric lights were expensive and even controversial, but they solved the danger problem and opened up a new world of colour and spectacle. By the early 20th century, electric tree lights were a seasonal industry, and the twinkling tree as we know it was born. Public trees became civic rituals. In the United States, the first White House Christmas tree was displayed in 1889 under President Benjamin Harrison. In 1923, President Calvin Coolidge presided over the first national Christmas tree lighting on the White House ellipse, making the tree a national symbol. In New York, construction workers put up an impromptu tree at Rockefeller Center during the hard winter of 1931. By 1933, the Rockefeller Center tree lighting became an official annual event, a beacon of cheer in the Great Depression. Trees moved from households to public squares, turning private wonder into shared identity. Not every trend stuck, but they all left a trace. In the mid-20th century, aluminum Christmas trees shimmered through living rooms, especially in the late 1950s and early 1960s, complete with rotating color wheel spotlights. They looked futuristic, sometimes a little cold, and after the 1965 A Charlie Brown Christmas special gently mocked the artificial tree craze, their popularity dipped. Later, PVC artificial trees took over as a convenience item and remain popular today. Fiber optic strands, pre-lit branches, and collapsible frames reflect a modern holiday shaped by storage space, budgets, and safety codes. Let's zoom back in on meaning. Why a star or an angel on top? The angel echoes the gospel story. I bring you good news of great joy. The star represents the Star of Bethlehem, guiding the Magi. In some homes, a crown nods to Christ the King. In others, a simple bow says, "This is a gift." At the base, a nativity set might gather, uniting the tree's vertical symbolism, earth to heaven, with the horizontal story of a family gathered around a child. What about those quirky traditions you hear about? The Christmas pickle, supposedly a German custom where a pickle ornament is hidden in the tree, and the first child to find it gets an extra gift. Fun game. But most Germans have never heard of it. It likely began as a late 19th century American marketing gimmick. Another favourite story claims the very first public Christmas tree stood in Riga, Latvia in 1510, while Tallinn, Estonia points to records from 1441 about a festive tree erected by a merchants' guild. The truth is complicated by different kinds of trees and different kinds of celebrations. What matters is that the Baltic and German worlds were early incubators of the idea, greenery as a focal point for winter festivity. As the tree travelled globally, it adapted. In Ukraine, spiderweb ornaments appear on some trees, referencing a folktale where a poor family wakes to find their tree draped in webs turned to silver, a sign of unexpected blessing. In parts of Scandinavia, straw ornaments recall agrarian roots and the Yule goat. In Mexico, where the nativity scene traditionally dominates, trees still appear, often festooned with brightly painted ornaments and paper crafts. In the Philippines, parole star lanterns glow alongside trees, blending local light with imported evergreen. The tree is less a single tradition than a shared stage for many. You can't talk about modern trees without touching the real versus artificial debate. Real trees are a farmed crop. In many regions, they're replanted annually and can be composted after use, but they require transport and, sometimes, fertilizers. Artificial trees are reusable, convenient, and tidy, but they're plastic and metal, often shipped long distances. Environmental studies tend to say that if you use your artificial tree for many seasons, think a decade or more, it can offset its footprint compared to buying a real tree every year. Ultimately, people choose based on family habits, storage, scent preferences, allergies, and the ritual of picking a tree together. The fact that we debate this at all shows how central the tree has become to the season's values: memory, stewardship, and shared experience. If you listen closely, the decorations you hang are a quiet conversation across centuries. Apples became glass baubles, wafers became cookies, then gingerbread men, then ornaments shaped like gingerbread men, candles became strings of light, then programmable LEDs. Nuts became tiny presents, then actual presents under the branches. Angels and stars hovered all along. Even the act of placing a tree near a window, once done so passers-by could share in its glow, survives in our eagerness to post photos of "the tree is up" for friends and family far away. So why do we decorate Christmas trees? Because across cultures we look for life in winter, for light in darkness, for a moment when home feels like the center of the universe. The Christmas tree gathers stories, biblical, folkloric, royal, immigrant, commercial, and turns them into a single object that children can marvel at and grandparents can remember by. It's a living museum in your living room. The next time you pull an ornament from the box, pause and ask what it's a descendant of. Is that red ball a memory of Eden's apple? Is that star a traveller's compass? Is that bird a Lauscha glassblower's masterpiece echoing through time? Even a silly pickle has a tale to tell about how traditions are invented, sold, adopted, and loved. If you enjoyed this dive into the roots of a familiar tradition, subscribe to Past and Present for more hidden histories behind the objects and rituals in our lives. And in the comments, tell us about one ornament on your tree that carries a story. After all, history is just memory with lights on.